What's up, guys and gals? It's Jerry from Rauta. This time it's another worst to best, also known as ranking video. The band in question comes from no else but New York, United States of America, and it's Typo Negative. Yes, very much out of my comfort zone. That was the deal here, personally, to pick a kind of a band that has been disbanded for a lot of time, was very popular, but also something that I don't usually listen to. I'll explain that before we go all the ranking and going through the discography here once again. Now, everybody who has been following the channel for quite some time knows that I mostly listen to black metal, death metal, thrash metal, a little bit of heavy metal on the side, hard rock and whatnot. So the bands I have been mostly having here in these ranking videos, or worst the best ones I like to call them, have been mostly about the bands that I've been listening to, for personal reasons. It's not like I pick a project, but just something that I really enjoy listening to. Now, my history with Typo Negative is quite the contrary, but it's not exactly very simple. When I first heard the band around early 90s, I kind of disliked it like a lot. That was one of my late teenage years when I was going towards black metal. I was mostly spending my time with death metal and thrash metal and I guess a little bit groove or heavy metal, whatever. And when there was song like Christian Woman, I was like, what the hell is this? I was this strong anti-Christian already back in the days. And I was like, I'm not going to take this kind of stuff. Also, it was way too gothic, way too slow and all that stuff. I've never been exactly allergic to doom metal, but most of the doom metal bands, something that never clicked with me. I'm talking about as classic bands, coming from Black Sabbath and all the way to the more modern doom metal bands, but also in general, the bands that were labeled on doom death, My Dying Bride, etc., never totally clicked with me, but there are always exceptions. But come to a October Rust in 1996 or 7, I am not really sure, but roughly that era, when I heard that hit song, My Girlfriend's Girlfriend, and then I dubbed the date. That was around the tape trading was still happening, not too much with my case, but still had those dubbed tapes. That was something that, okay, now this band sounds different and I kind of like it. But then I forgot it. I got rid of tapes maybe 2 years later. And it was all about CDs and MP3s. MP3 trading was kind of replacing tape trading, which I never got too much into. But that was still happening. And, that was something that kind of happened in Typo Negative world for me. Later on, once again, when music videos started emerging via YouTube and all, so it wasn't so much a music television thing anymore, I got to hear a song here or two, and I was like, okay, this sounds like a little bit different band. Maybe I should, listen to it and like it, but that was all over forgotten. So my history with Typo Negative is very much like a song here and song there, but mostly it was something like I'm gonna dig deep into the territory or terrain that I am not familiar with. So this is my excuse or disclaimer why I am doing this kind of video, and which is also the reason why my ranking might feel a little bit weird to you. I mean, sometimes people totally agree when I say it's gonna be weird, and sometimes people are like, what the hell is this guy doing and talking about, because this makes no sense. That's something that I got, for example, for my Slayer ranking video. But I think the less predictable the certain ranking or worst to best order is, the better, because otherwise there would be no point if everybody was like, okay, we're gonna agree with you totally about the ranks and whatever. Anyway, now I got this hint that I should also read Peter Steele Biography when making this video. And to be honest, when I was listening to the albums by Typo Negative, I decided I want to read that book. So I got it from my library. And now that I've read about 70 pages out of 300 something. And it's been really, really interesting. I'm going to get back to the book in a different video. Let's review that book. But it gave me a lot of boost for making this video. Not so much because it would teach me a lot of details, and I don't want to go very deep into that because this video would be then 60 minutes long. Nobody would watch it. But also I think it, is supposed to get a different topic when we focus mostly on Peter Steele and his career and the band. whereas this is just merely a ranking video. So how I did it was, once again, going through Spotify, giving all these albums 3 listens and then some. And I was making notes all the time, like what is this album about, how it sounds into my ears, what things I like, which things I don't like, which things are cool and which are not. And of course, like I said, some people are gonna totally disagree with me, and it's more than fine. But also I wanted to listen to Carnivore before actual Type O Negative, not because they're the same band, but because it kind of gives a little bit of reflecting history on Type O Negative. I don't know how many people actually realize the link between Type O Negative and Carnivore and Fallout and Repulsion, but they all have their play in the whole history of the band. And even though the lineup, I mean for Type O Negative anyway, apart from Peter Steele, is different, it kind of all resonates throughout the thing here. Now, I didn't go for Fallout, I didn't go for Repulsion. That goes like way beyond, and other than that, Repulsion or Fallout never did full album, so there's something that I can totally skip. But what was very new to me and interesting, and I think it's worth mentioning here as well, is that even though Type O Negative might seem the new band starting in 1990, now of course, or well, 1989, but as with a new minority name. But I mean, the thing here is the band started already more than 30 years ago. So technically speaking old, but I remember when in around 1993 or so, when, or might be 1994, when I heard Bloody Kisses, or at least some songs of it. I mean, back in the days it was the new band. And as such, it kind of sticks to me that these guys came late to the party in the 1990s and they're older. But what I learned throughout listening then and talking to my friends about the band and about this video project and also reading the book was that actually those bands that they started with were as early as 1970s. So really, really old stuff. I mean, I'm talking about Fallout, the first band that actually recorded at least something. Fallout by Peter Steele and his friends. That was like late 70s. So they were actually very, very early birds to the genre and actually pioneering the whole thing here, including various elements, you know, and changing all the time. But Fallout never made an album, so we're gonna just skip it. And Repulsion was like more like a sidestep, which is more not much more than a side note in this thing. But Carnivore is worth mentioning because they did a couple of albums and then some, and they have this weird combination of doom metal and thrash metal and other elements, maybe hardcore I guess could be called in place, and that kind of gave the birth what Type O Negative later on came to be. I mean, they started with kind of something that we could describe as a successor to Carnivore, but obviously later on, quite soon after they started, became something very different. So it's part of the evolution here and worth mentioning. And for me, listening to Fallout was quite refreshing because there's a lot of venom in it, but also being quite different. And what I learned from reading the book, that those guys mentioned venom as like one of their shared passion or inspiration. So venom is definitely right there. It wasn't my imagination only. It was definitely right there. But what Carnivore created and later on became something new with under the name Type O Negative with a lineup, it's interesting because, well, first came Slow, Deep and Hard in 1991. Groundbreaking album for many people, I guess. Never heard it back in the day, so can't really comment on that. But it was clearly, you know, kind of like taking the next level, like taking Carnivore and then pushing the envelope once again. It's almost like refining the ideas and the sound and everything on it. It's a weird combination of styles really these days, and that's why I guess having this gothic / doom metal as genre for Type O Negative or Metal Archives is a little bit misleading because those first albums are not exactly that. I mean, they do have the elements, but they are as much something different as Carnivore were. And when Origin of the Feces, which is not a live album, but kind of like, I know, much like Live Undead is to Slayer after Show No Mercy, it's the kind of a semi-live thing. I mean, done in studio as far as I could understand, but it's using the same songs and it feels like a little bit weird, like it's as if it was kind of a demo version with a little bit of different takes than Slow, Deep and Hard. I don't even know why it was released as a full-length album. Makes not much sense these days, but maybe back in the days there was a reason. Now with Bloody Kisses, things changed a lot. Came those clean vocals became more present. There was suddenly this very, very gothic, very doomy things, especially with songs like Black Number One and Christian Woman. So suddenly it was like a different band. But then again, the deeper you go into that album, you can hear those Carnivore elements back in the album. So it's kind of all over the place. It's almost like a compilation of ideas, which makes it rather weird. I mean, gives you this idea, okay, it's very gothic, it's very vampiric and clean vocals, and Peter Steele's super deep voice, which is very charismatic, and some of the very catchy riffs and keyboard parts and everything. But it's not like Slow, Deep and Hard, I mean, as whole. But there are elements which are there, and they could be as, as little or as from like Carnivore. With October Rust, they kind of honed and refined the whole gothic thing way deeper, and that became like a different game, as if they're taking the best parts of Bloody Kisses, removing those Carnivore or early elements, and not saying they're bad, but they're different, and making once again this really whole album. It was like a different band and different level, and I guess that kind of shows through reviews and everything like that. Once again, they kept doing that with World Coming Down, Light Is Killing Me, and Dead Again. And before they could make a new album, Peter Steele unfortunately died. So once again, one of those tragic bands, and I've included these tragic bands, including Slayer, including Pantera, where the members are dead. And that's one of the most common reasons for bands to quit before due time. I mean, there are lots of bands that have been going on more than 40 years and not stopping. I'm talking about bands like Metallica, Iron Maiden, etc. But bands like Motorhead, bands like Type O Negative, bands like Slayer, I mean, eventually they either slow down or just quit altogether because one of the key members died. As tragic as it is, I think it's totally understandable. Panther, for example, 2 members dead. Doesn't make much of a sense to continue with that kind of stuff. And with Type O Negative, Peter Steele being the mastermind, the director of the band, well, Type O Negative wouldn't be Type O Negative without Peter Steele. So it's more like James Hetfield of Metallica dying and the rest of the band's going. Makes no fucking sense. Now let's get into my personal ranking with the video with all my rambling, and I'll try to describe why these albums make sense to me in this particular order. Once again, feel free to disagree, and I kind of hope that you would, and challenge me with your words and likes and comments. But for me, the weakest one is The Origin of the Feces, Not Live at Pride and Beach album. Quite a shocking cover, not exactly something that people want to see too much, but I mean, it kind of showed their ways of humor with the album. Because back in the days, anyway, they were doing a lot of Carnivore stuff, which then again kind of had roots in Fallout, having these World War III and IV themes, barbaric cannibals and all that stuff, and lots of kind of a distorted humor, which clicks with some people, me included, but not everybody. But this is more like recycling ideas from the first album, but not exactly as clear vision, if you ask me. So to me, it's more like why you would release such a release. Now, I'm not saying it's a bad album, but for me, it's a very lukewarm album for a couple of reasons. First of all, it doesn't really improve their first album. Secondly, the songs are not that good. It's not the Type O Negative I'm into, so for me, it goes to the worst position in the ranking. And now you can pretty much guess which is my second one. It's one of the most loved albums by the band, and that is Slow, Deep and Hard. Now, this takes items and elements and ideas from Carnivore albums, but in my opinion loses the best things which were present there. I mean, where Carnivore were more trashier and less doomier, and were more aggressive and dirtier, Slow, Deep and Hard is taking some of those parts, but also having these doomier parts, which I'm not really keen. And there are lots of long songs. It's almost like experimental doom in so many ways. Once again, credited for being pioneer work, I can totally understand it. But as an album that really kind of nails it doesn't really work for me. I get why like a lot of people like it, because it's something different. It's not something that you really copy or imitate that well, but doesn't really click with me. So for me, it's the second worst Type O Negative album. And I guess I could say it's one of those albums I don't need to go back to. They are both kind of okay-ish albums, better than mediocrity, but not exactly good in my books. So they would be the bottom holders in my books for Type O Negative. To my surprise, I'm actually now admitting that liking these gothic elements by Type O Negative are the best parts the band ever did. And now it gets a little bit weird. Now, one of my friends I had talked with about Type O Negative said that World Coming Down was a disappointment for him after October Rust. Here on Metal Archives, however, it's rated as the best album on average score. And to me, it's the third worst album by Type O Negative. Why so? Well, let's put it this way. After the great October Rust album, this felt like a very kind of a consistent but also quite boring album. First of all, it's super lengthy, and there are no basically like hit songs. Well, there are better parts like Rauta Plays and stuff like that, but mostly it's just like, I don't know, it's not going anyplace. Everyone I Love Is Dead is a good song, I'll give it that, but mostly it's just like filler parts of Type O Negative's gothic phase. And I'm not too happy about it. I mean, it's like something that I can totally listen, but becomes more like a background music for me. And as such, it feels a little bit of a disappointment. By no means a bad one, but it's not exactly a good album. So for me, it takes the, well, third worst position in Type O Negative albums. Now, there are plenty of albums happening after and before this, which are, in my opinion, better. But this gets complicated because at first I had figured out only the best album in the business. And that is by Type O Negative. And that is clear to me since the very first listen, and that didn't really change over time. Now, what did change after that is the other albums. And I was figuring out whether it should be Dead Again or Bloody Kisses. But I ended up Bloody Kisses being on the fourth place of the albums. But now I have to credit that even though I said I didn't originally like Christian Woman or Black Number One, but I mean, I kind of like them a lot. I mean, they're way too lengthy in my opinion for their own good, and they're kind of a super cheesy. And also there's a lot of weird ideas later on, and once again the album is super lengthy. But I kind of got to like these songs because, you know, they are actually the ones that tap into the more gothic side, and they're not afraid of being done with black humor and also those super cheesy gothic styles. So, in a way, this is actually the first kind of a goodish album in my book. I would say World Coming Down is decent, but not as good as Bloody Kisses. But still, this is kind of all over the place, having those older ideas, which are, then again, more carnivorean rather than the later Type O Negative albums. But still, I would say Bloody Kisses takes the fourth place in my ranking. But how are the rest? Now you pretty much figured out my favorite Type O Negative album, but the 2 and 3, they are a little bit mystery to me still. Originally I was going to say Bloody Kisses takes the third spot, but I would actually say it's Dead Again. Now Dead Again is, in my opinion, a good continuation to what was happening before that, and this became the swan song album of the band. And even though this is not as catchy as October Rust, it has great songs like She Burned Me Down, Catch You One, Dead Again, and overall this is a strong album. You know, of course all the albums have quite solid production, but to be honest, it could be way more polished. So they always wanted to have rather unrefined and kind of a rusty, kind of a dirty, or as some people would say, it's kind of a, you know, rustic. In a way, it's more like, hey, let's go into a barn and use some old equipment to record it, and let's make it super clean and clear, but more like a little bit dirt and dust and things of mold and all that shit. But I mean, it works for them, so who I am to say it's like a bad decision. Anyway, yeah, that is, in my opinion, the third best album. Why Life is Killing Me is the second best is for various reasons. And what separates the best things from the second best is, in my opinion, how are the best songs. And this actually features one of my favorite, maybe the favorite song of Type O Negative, I Don't Wanna Be Me. It's very catchy, it's very dark, and it's kind of self-ironic, very Peter Steele-like, as much as I could understand. And the overall album, once again, super lengthy, and all these could be, you know, shorter ones. But, I mean, this album, you know, works very well, like, overall. So this could be my second best, or second favorite Type O Negative album. The only one, actually, which I added recently to my want list, which I could actually put into my shelf, however, is my favorite Type O Negative album, which I guess comes no surprise. This is rated as the second best here in Metal Archive's October Rust. I mean, I guess this is the most defining Type O Negative album in so many ways. It's super gothic, it features those hit songs, and everything just clicks in place. This is, among other Type O Negative albums, super lengthy, more than 70 minutes, but it doesn't feel like that. I think that's a very meaningful thing, because there are two ways to do lengthy albums. The ones that don't feel that lengthy, like, wow, was it really 70 minutes? I thought it was like 45. And then there are albums which are like, is this 70 minutes? No, it's actually 50. So albums that feels like they're like a drag show, and albums which are like, wow, I'm gonna go back to that. So this was the album I enjoyed the most. And I don't care, once again, if they're super cheesy and catchy, like almost like pop songs like My Girlfriend's Girlfriend, which actually originally got me to like this album back in the 96 or 97. I'm not sure. They came out 96. I had to double check it, so I'm not talking out of my ass when I say I probably heard it in 1996. But it was probably 1996. Could have been 1997. Doesn't really matter. But there are also songs like this Red Water, Christmas Morning, which is just like super dark and gothic, and reminds me of my favorite bands, such as Paradise Lost, which is kind of a very gothic and dark, and you know the feeling. But what is funny with Type O Negative is at the same time it can sound so British with, you know, having these Paradise Lost and My Dying Bride kind of a doom, death, gothic things. It's actually having humor such as Turbo Negro. I mean, they have All My Friends Are Dead, and Everyone I Love Is Dead. There's kind of a similarity with the humor and darkness, but still making good songs, which are even catchy. And then there are these wordplays, which it seems Peter Steele liked a lot, and metaphors and like that, which then again remind me, for example, you know, Mötley Crüe. I mean, I remember when I was listening to, you know, early Mötley Crüe and having like Looks That Kill. And there's some cool wordplays, in my opinion, about how to describe a really hot woman, for instance. Type O Negative does that in a similar way, but also differently, because it's Peter Steele, New York fashion, rather than California beauty girls and all that stuff. So there are lots of similarities with different kind of bands that don't sound like Type O Negative at all. So we're talking about hard rock, we're talking about death doom. Well, this could be linked to the music as well. And we're talking about some kind of death punk. But they also have these weird links and connections. And I can only dream that these have some connections which are either subconscious or just thought of. But I don't know. Anyway, interesting band altogether, and I wish Type O Negative could have been going on. But, I mean, when death comes knocking on your door, there's not too much you can do about it. But an interesting band, and stepping out of my comfort zone was rewarding this time. Now, I cannot really say the same about the next band I'm going to feature in Worst to Best or ranking videos. I'm going to talk about that next month, so hold your breath. But once again, if you feel like I should be talking about a band in ranking video Worst to Best, I'll give you 3 guidelines. First of all, if the band is now disbanded, that's good to go. But it has to have at least 3 full albums. Makes no sense to do Worst to Best videos with a band that has a couple of demos and 1 album out. The band doesn't have to be disbanded, but it has to be at least 30 years old. Makes no sense to best video of a band that is 15 years old, has 4 albums out and still making one. So let's focus on the bands that are either disbanded or so old that it's reasonable to go through their career. I have one in the making, so you can always keep suggesting or recommending me some bands that I should be ranking videos about. This is my tape of Tycho Negative, very long one, suits the band's theme. Looking forward to your comments. Which are your favorite ones? And if you haven't been listening to the band, why so? Step out of your comfort zone, challenge yourself, and maybe you will find some likable songs or albums like I did with this one. So it was a very, very interesting trip to go through the discography 3 full times and then some. And I will be going to these later on as well. But now it's me time to say bye-bye. Take care and listen to some Untitled Negative and read the book. Let's get back to that later on. Now, bye-bye.